It began with silence. Not the ordinary kind, but a silence that followed people who were supposed to return. A silence that stretched for days, then weeks. A silence that made experienced investigators uneasy long before they understood why. Something had gone wrong. Whatever it was, it did not fit any familiar pattern. And even now, decades later, no explanation fully survives scrutiny. The story centers on a group of young people who were trained, capable, and prepared. They were not reckless. They were not inexperienced. They were not lost. Yet what happened to them defied logic from the very first discovery. Shoes left behind. Clothing abandoned in freezing conditions. Injuries that could not be easily explained. And decisions that made no sense, even under extreme stress. The question is not simply how they died. The question is why they acted the way they did. To understand that, it is necessary to return to the beginning, before the mystery existed at all. In the late winter of 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers set out on an expedition into a remote mountain region. They were students and recent graduates, most of them in their early 20s, all with strong backgrounds in outdoor survival. This was not their first journey into harsh terrain. They had completed similar trips before. They understood cold. They understood risk. They understood each other. Their goal was to reach a distant mountain peak as part of a certification-level expedition. It was demanding but not impossible. Conditions were difficult, but within the range of what they had trained for. They kept detailed plans. They informed others of their route. They expected to return on schedule. When they did not return, concern did not immediately turn into alarm. Delays were common in expeditions like this. Weather could slow progress. Terrain called force détour. Everyone assumed they would reappear soon, tired but safe. They never did. After several days passed without contact, a search was organized. At first it was small, made up of fellow students and volunteers. Later, it expanded to include official teams. What they found would only deepen the mystery. The group's tent was discovered on a slope, partially collapsed under snow. At first glance, it looked like a typical campsite abandoned after a storm. But closer inspection revealed something deeply unsettling. The tent had been cut open from the inside. This detail changed everything. There was no sign of an external threat at the campsite. No evidence of animals. No signs of struggle. Yet the hikers had exited their shelter in a way that suggested urgency, even panic. They did not use the entrance. They cut their way out. Footprints led away from the tent. They were visible despite the snow, preserved by the cold. The footprints showed that the group had moved downhill, away from their shelter. They were not running. They were walking. Some appeared barefoot. Others wore socks or a single shoe. This behavior was difficult to reconcile with the environment. The temperature that night was dangerously low. Leaving the tent without proper clothing would have been a near-certain death sentence. And yet, they did exactly that. The footprints ended near a tree line some distance away. There, the first bodies were found. 2 of the hikers lay near the remains of a small fire. They were dressed only in underwear. Their skin showed signs of prolonged exposure to extreme cold. Branches on the nearby tree were broken high above the ground, as if someone had climbed it, perhaps to look back toward the campsite. Others were found scattered between the tree line and the tent, as though they had attempted to return. Their positions suggested exhaustion, collapse, the slow failure of bodies pushed beyond their limits. At first, hypothermia seemed to offer a simple explanation. But simplicity did not last. As the remaining hikers were discovered over the following months, new details emerged that complicated everything. Some had severe internal injuries, broken ribs, crushed skulls, injuries comparable to high-impact trauma. And yet, there were no external wounds to match the damage. No signs of a fight. No evidence of an avalanche strong enough to cause such injuries. One hiker was missing her tongue. Others had traces of radiation on their clothing. Each new fact raised more questions than it answered. Investigators struggled to reconstruct a coherent sequence of events. The timeline itself seemed unstable. Why would experienced hikers abandon their tent at night? Why leave essential supplies behind? Why move calmly at first, then appear to panic later? Why were some injuries so severe, while others showed only exposure? The official investigation concluded with a vague statement. The cause of death was attributed to an unknown compelling force. It was an answer that explained nothing, and in many ways admitted defeat. Over time, theories multiplied. Some suggested a natural phenomenon, a sudden environmental event that created intense fear without leaving obvious traces. Others proposed military involvement, citing the radiation and reports of strange lights seen in the sky that night. There were whispers of secret tests, weapons experiments, things that could not be acknowledged. Another explanation focused on psychology, a rare condition induced by extreme cold and stress. A breakdown of rational thought, panic spreading through the group. One decision triggering another, until survival instincts failed entirely. There were even theories involving sound. Low-frequency vibrations produced by wind interacting with the terrain. Frequencies that could cause anxiety, confusion, and fear. An invisible force, felt but not seen. And then there were the more speculative ideas. Unknown creatures. Extraordinary encounters. Forces beyond conventional science. These explanations captured attention, but lacked evidence strong enough to stand on their own. Despite numerous reinvestigations over the years, no single theory has managed to account for every detail. Each one explains something, but not everything. Each one leaves behind loose ends that refuse to be tied. What remains most disturbing is not the injuries or the environment. It is the behavior, the calm walking away from safety, the lack of defensive wounds, the silence of the mountains afterward. These were people who knew how to survive, people who understood cold and fear, people who should not have made the choices they did, and yet they did. Some argue that the truth may never be fully known. Evidence has been lost to time. Witnesses are gone. Memories fade. Records disappear. What is left is a puzzle with missing pieces, assembled again and again by those trying to make sense of it. Perhaps the explanation is simple, waiting to be accepted. Or perhaps it is complex, involving factors we still do not fully understand. Or perhaps the case resists explanation because it sits at the edge of what we are comfortable admitting. That sometimes, even with preparation and knowledge, humans can be overwhelmed by circumstances that leave no clear trace. The mountain remains silent. The case remains open in the minds of those who study it, and the questions remain unanswered. What forced them out of their shelter that night? What frightened them enough to walk into the cold? And if it happened once, could it happen again? Some mysteries fade with time. Others only grow darker.